Cornish.
My name is Marge Bennett.
And we both are lifetime residents of Powell, and we both know about the Martins and the Perrys.
And our families have lived here for several generations.
I grew up in my great-grandfather's Timothy Colvin's house, and there were a lot of old things there. One day I was going through an old wooden box where he had left many papers, and I came across the wedding invitation to the wedding of Mary Lowry and Albert Martin. I was surprised to find this because it was in 1986, just when we were talking about saving the Martin Perry house, and we had just started the Powell-Liberty Historical Society, so we would have an organization for saving the house. The invitation was sent to my great-grandfather, Mr. Timothy Colvin, and his wife.
Mary Martin was my great aunt, and she was a sister to my grandmother, and was born in the house where I now live. And I live in my great grandparents' house, and I didn't know anything about this wedding until the Historical Society. So we were really pleased to do a reenactment of the wedding a couple years ago in the very house where it took place. Well, one of the neatest things I think about old houses is that they had a really fancy parlor for company, Sundays only, and most front porches on an old-fashioned house have two front doors. And we're in the fanciest room of this particular house, and you can tell by how ornate the woodwork is. Here's the front door that would be open for special occasions like the wedding or funerals or maybe some Sunday affair. And then the other front door that you'll see in a minute is in the family parlor. So the woodwork in here is more ornate, and this is a special room in the house. And we put our Christmas tree in here when we do Christmas too. Okay. I don't think I was ever really in this room because when the Perrys lived here, this was a bedroom, a spare bedroom. There are several bedrooms upstairs, and of course the birthing room off the family parlor. But this was not used as a fancy parlor that I remember from being a little girl running in and out with the Perry kids.
The Martins did use it as a parlor. I'm sure my mother has been in here many times because she was a very good friend of both Martin girls, Hazel and Helen. They were about the same age, and they were friends as far as back as I can remember. And my mother has talked about them when she was a young girl, how she visited here.
I suspect my mother was in here too. She was cousin. They were cousins, and she just lived down the street. So, but myself, this room is new. All right, the floors refinished beautifully. These are the original floors all over the house, and the woodwork did too. Roger and Eleanor Hawk really worked to get this woodwork down to where it's just beautiful, and it was not easy to do with all those creases and indentations in the wood. The wicker fire or flower basket over there is a very old-fashioned kind of thing too, and it would have done well in here. The woodwork is just, all I can say, hard to clean and dust, so the wallpaper shows it off beautifully. Well, I took lessons from Mrs. Perry from the time I was about 6 till I was in high school, and she was an excellent teacher, but she didn't have a very good student in me. But a lot of children here took. You did too, didn't you, Louise?
Mm-hmm.
How long did you take?
I don't remember exactly. Mrs. Perry was a great pianist. She played many years for the Rebecca Lodge. She played for a time for the Methodist Church in Powell, and she taught, as Marge said, music lessons to many children here in Powell.
And she kept time with a ruler, and you better keep good time too.
And when we got the house and started refurnishing it, my first idea was, where will we find a piano that looks much like the one Mrs. Perry had? And man that I graduated from high school with, the high school was right across the street here, finally found the piano and donated it. He bought it and brought it up, set it up here. Morris Thomas. And we certainly appreciate that, because this house wouldn't seem right to me without the piano in this corner.
That's right.
Since I was in the same high school class as Ida Perry, I was here an awful lot. And anytime a bunch of kids gathered here in the evening, Mrs. Perry would play the piano, we'd all sing, or sometimes we rolled back the rug and danced here. In fact, I think this is where I learned to dance.
She played a lot of dance music, and my dad did too, so they traded music sometimes back and forth. Played jazzy tunes, you know, not just serious, sober stuff. I started with Mrs. Perry at 6. I took for 1 year from Doris Bales when I was 5, which was a disaster because I was too young. Used to kick the piano because I didn't want to practice.
I started taking piano lessons after I graduated from high school, because I wasn't fortunate enough to have a piano before I graduated. And I suspect I took for 4 years, but she was such an excellent teacher. She had me playing hard music before very long. Also, we might mention that when Mrs. Perry played the piano, when a group of young people came in, her son Leroy was great on the fiddle, and he would join in and play too.
He was really good. They had several children, and I know the girls played piano, but I don't think the other boys were musical, were they?
Not that I know of.
Just the oldest son, Leroy. When the Perrys came here in the early 20s, they were new to the area. They were both from Pennsylvania, and Mrs. Perry's musical education was in her home state. And Irvin Perry, though, being from Pennsylvania, did get his engineering degree at Ohio Northern University. And he was sent here by his company to work on the O'Shaughnessy Dam that was being built in those early 20s. So when the Perrys moved in, and then we had a new music teacher in the area. Lucille Sharp Canfield was a native here, and her musical education was from Ohio Wesleyan. And so there was a sort of a division of labor there. Part of the time, Mary Perry played piano at the church and so forth, and part of the time, Lucille Sharp Canfield did, and she also later, I think, played the organ when they got the organ. I'm not sure of that. But the two women, neither one of them had all of the students in town. There would be a group that took from Mary Perry and a group from Lucille. So for a tiny little town, we were kind of lucky to have such musical talent. I don't think, other than the oldest Perry boy, that the other two boys were musical. I don't remember that they were. I know the girls both played, or Jean and Alice both played piano, and I'm not sure about Ivan. Ivan went to school with you, so maybe you would remember. Jean was just 1 year younger than me, and then there was a younger boy. So there was a lot of talent in this little teeny town, the way it was small then, what, a couple hundred? And now it's 3,000. So
we are very fortunate to have this old desk. This desk has been in Powell since at least 1870, when the Oddfellows Lodge was built. And this was in their lodge hall. I had two great-grandfathers who helped build and start the Oddfellows Lodge, so this is very interesting to me. The desk was donated by Fred Reeves, who was a late member of the lodge and still is a member. This desk was in fairly bad shape. It had a lot of scars and mars from the years it had been in the lodge there. And some of the late members had decided when they kind of spruced up the old lodge hall that this old desk had to go. And so Fred Reeves said, well, why don't I just take this home if you don't want it here anymore? And he did. He refinished it. And then when we started the Historical Society, Fred decided that here in Powell was the place it should be. And so we were very fortunate to get it. You can see that this desk is being used now. We keep papers and different things in here. And drawer still opens.
Well, the mantel is not the original mantel, but it's very much like the one we have a picture. The house stood empty for 9 years, and so the mantel, the original mantel, was stolen, and in fact they took some of the bullseyes off the woodwork. But we've been very fortunate to have help from other people, and we've got those things replaced. As I said, this woodwork is not quite as fancy as in the front parlor, but it's a good match. We also need more green tiles. When the Perrys were here, they didn't use the fireplace. They had a freestanding coal-burning heating stove, as most of our houses did have coal-burning stoves, and once in a while somebody had a furnace. They also had linoleum on the floors, which is one reason the floors were in such good shape when we had them refinished. So the stove was here, and the pipe went behind this picture of Dr. Campbell, and it made a very warm corner over there if you didn't get too close to the window in the wintertime, like most old houses.
You are looking at a picture of the Moser house. Mr. Moser was born in Germany in 1841. He came at the age of 17 to the United States. This house where he lived and had a mill was bought by him. The mill had been on the river there for several years before, but nobody had made a success of it. So Mr. Moser bought it and the house both. This house was first an inn. I don't know how old the house was, but it is now gone. It was just south of the Powell Hill on Route 315. The house, when it was an inn, had steps that went up from the road that went along the river there, which was a mud road at that time. And it had a spring house there where they got their water. And also the spring house had been used to keep things cool in the years before when it was an inn. And you are looking at the old Moser bed. It is made of black walnut that was cut on the farm where Mr. Moser lived along the river. And in his mill, he cut the log up into boards. And during his spare time, evenings and winters, when he wasn't too busy in the mill, he carved all the carving you see on this bed here. It's very intricate, and I'm told it took him 7 years to make this bed. Mr. Moser made the bed for his daughter, Anna Moser, who married Pete Case, and the bed was in the home that is still standing right below Jewett Road, south of Jewett Road, along 315 there. And this bed was used by the Case family until just recently, just about when we started the Historical Society. The two granddaughters that were living there then sold the house and furniture. And so when we heard about it, we rushed down to the house, and we had to buy the bed and the mirror, which you will see in a minute, from an antique dealer. So rather than let the wonderful bed get out of the area, 3 of us went together and bought the bed. And here you can see another thing that Mr. Mulzer made for his daughter. It is a mirror, and it is also made of black walnut from the Mulzer farm, and it came from his mill, and it is very intricately carved, and we don't know how many years it took him to make this, but I would guess it'd be quite a while. And this hung in his daughter's house too for many, many years. Above the mirror, above the bed here, you can see Mr. Mulzer's picture. And over here we have Mrs. Mulzer. Mr. Mulzer was quite a nice-looking old gentleman in the picture here. On the bed here we have Mrs. Mulzer's German Bible. I hear that she sat every evening and read from her German Bible, although she, of course, spoke English. Mrs. Mulzer was not born in Germany herself, but she was born from a German family that lived in Marysville, Ohio. This is Mrs. Mulzer's picture. As you can see, the frame is gone. Perhaps some antique dealer got it along the way sometime. We hope to replace the frame when we can find the appropriate one.
This is something that most children, when they come through the Historical Society house, don't know what it is. Some of them do, but they're always real surprised. And we tell them also that real ones, of course this is real, but ladies used to crochet a cover, a crocheted cloth cover so the lid didn't clang so in the middle of the night. And just think about this, you know, after it's used, somebody has to then pick it up and take it downstairs the next day and empty it out, rinse it out, and bring it back up for the next time. The children especially are just fascinated. Sometimes if they've been to camp, they realize what you're talking about. Otherwise, it's just like, that's not possible. But most houses had outhouses outside. They didn't have bathrooms inside with plumbing inside, and this is the way it was. They had small, little low ones too, for smaller children. But this is the real thing, and it does need a crochet cover so the lid doesn't make a noise when you put it back on or take it off. But, and it's very pretty. The really fancy sets, we don't have a chamber pot set, had wash bowls that matched and containers for water, big pitchers. Okay, this is a picture of the very first graduating class. It was in 1912 of the new school, the new 4-year high school that they had in Powell. And it was sometimes called the Monument on the Hill. Before that, the high schools had been held in the church and in the post office and so forth. My mother, and this is my mother right here, was in the very first graduating class. Now her older brothers, in order to get a 4-year education so they could go to college, had to live away from the area. They boarded and attended high schools elsewhere. And my Uncle Ross graduated from Ohio State, and my Uncle Jack attended Ohio Wesleyan. But Mother graduated from a 4-year high school right here in Powell. I graduated from the same high school. And, well, at least in there you see a picture of the Monument on the Hill. And that building held all 12 grades. First and second was in one room, third and fourth was in another, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and the other 3 rooms were high school rooms. And that school, like this house, didn't have indoor restrooms. We had outhouses out on each side in the back, the other side by the ball diamond. The school clock is not from the Powell School. That's from another school in Liberty Township, from Hyatt's school, just north a few miles. And we're lucky to have that. We don't have very many pictures either from the Hyatt School. I think we only have 1 or 2 of their graduating classes. We'd like to have school pictures of all the graduating classes from all the Powell-Liberty Township schools. We have paintings of the Bovee School, that still stands. That was a little red schoolhouse. It still stands on Powell Road out near the zoo. It's on Craig Askin's farm. We have a nice diploma from the Liberty Township School, which was in Powell before it was a 4-year school.